Hi, I'm Paul Antiguk, and this is another 5 to 15 minute video in connection to Alaska Studies and for my course, Issues in Alaska Native Education. This topic is on gold mining in Alaska. It's such an important chapter of or aspect of Alaska history, and there was a lot of misunderstanding about how that happens. On this one, we're going to really focus on how it actually happens rather than the historical context and impact. We're just trying to illustrate how gold mining happens in Alaska. All right, and we're going to start big. In fact, we're going to start with the largest gold dredge in Alaska and, from my understanding, in North America. And it would be this one. This is dredge number 5. It's in Nome, Alaska. I have a lot of personal experience with it because I worked on it. I worked out in the Thaw field in front of it. I worked on the gold dredge itself as a deckhand. And then the next season, I was promoted to stern oiler on the dredge. And that would be, if I can use this little marker, this long thing at the back, and that is the backside, is showing about where this is a stern, the backside. So just in front of that tall structure there, all the way back, that's what I was responsible for. It's not only huge, it's hugely important to understand how these gold dredges operated, and they really change, I think, for a lot of people, the perspective on what gold mining is all about. Because I think that the mythology, the image, is always a prospector holding a pan of gold, a pan for looking for gold, and people think, oh, well, that's how people found gold, and a lot of money was made. But really, gold panning is an exploration tool. It's intended to be something so that you can find traces of gold, and as you move upstream, hopefully you're finding more of it. Maybe you're finding heavier nuggets because the heavier ones would come out of the gold vein, and because they're heavier, they don't go as far downstream. And so the gold miner is taking up potential material and just panning it side to side, just rolling it, trying to get all the lighter stuff off. And the idea is that the water will wash the lighter stuff off first if you do it right, and then the gold itself, because it's heavier, will show up at the bottom of the pan. There's a real art form for being able to do it. Typically, though, there's not enough money in it to make gold panning pay your way as a gold prospector. It's a tool for exploration. As you move upstream, you're hopefully finding heavier and more gold. And then if you're really on a roll, you get some part where you're not getting any gold anymore. And that tells you the gold vein is somewhere downstream of where I am. Hopefully. That's the ideal. There are a lot of tricks on it, but ideally that's how that works. It's not meant to be the way of a person actually acquiring a great deal of gold. It's helping you to find where to do your actual gold dredging. Dredging at first for early miners looked like a baby crib or a rocker, and that's why it's called a rocker. It was manual. It was about the size of a tub, and it's an idea of the gold pan, except it's larger scale. More water is going in, more material is going into the bottom of it. You're pouring more water in, and instead of using your hands to roll this pan, you're moving this bathtub really back and forth slowly, and in the bottom are these, usually canvas is on the bottom, and then thin strips of wood are tacked in along the way, and that makes an uneven bottom so that as the water is washing over the material, the heavier parts eventually ends up at the bottom caught in these sluices, in these canvas and wood catches. That's a way to make money. That would be, for many people, that would be gold mining. That would be it. If you're one or two people, a tub-size rocker would be typically what you would do. It's hard to do much more than that. Very soon, though, and this is a part that doesn't show up in a lot of the mythological or stereotypes of gold mining, is that takes that first rich veins of gold that's easily accessible in streams, but it doesn't get the gold vein itself. And that's where some people are then using picks and other things, and they're trying to just get into that surface, and then they're putting that material into the sluice box and rocking. So now you've got another additional issue of labor that's happening. So you might have 3 or 4 or 5 people all working rockers and taking turns on what they're doing, either picking away the material or pouring it in or washing it with the water while somebody else is rocking it back and forth, the sluice. But that's only going to get you so far. It doesn't really get you all the way in for this. In Nome and in other places, typically there's a gold vein that you're trying to get at, and it might be 50, 100 feet, 150 feet down. And what do? A little rocker is just not going to be an efficient way to do it. So what happens after that first rush is that big companies come in and they buy out entire sections of individual claims that gold miners, prospectors that have title to. They just buy them all. They bulk purchase these. And that's where the heavy equipment and the industrial, commercial gold mining comes into play. Eventually you end up with a gold dredge, like gold dredge number 5, except smaller. How do they work, though? Because if you look at it, it's funny. I've watched tourists being taken on board a gold dredge, and they will often take the part with the tailings here and think that's the front because it's sticking out there. I don't know why, it just happens that way. They don't notice a window of the winch room, which is up here, that allows you to look forward so that this bucket line is actually doing the digging. So let's jump in and see if we can explain or illustrate, give you a basic idea of how this gold dredge actually is structured and how it works. And that'll be the next illustration. So, a lot of stuff going on in this illustration. Hopefully we can make it something that makes sense. So in front is thawed gravel. And that's really important because in a lot of Alaska, where gold is, it's permafrost. So it's ice. And a gold dredge just doesn't do very well in scraping up ice. And it might well have gold embedded in it. And if you run it through the water, it's not going to melt before it gets to the backside. So you're just shooting gold through the whole system, and it's falling out on the backside of it. So you have to thaw the field. And that is tricky. That's taking pipes of cold water, sometimes 100 or 200 pipes separated by about 20 feet, and they're just driven down in the ground by people there's a sharp point, but you're not pounding it into the ice because it'll dull the thing. You just have cold water rushing through that, and you're just turning it side to side every now and again. So normally a thaw field worker will walk up and down, and they'll be responsible for a set of pipes. 15 or 20 of them would be typical. And you're just making sure they don't freeze up and that they're continuing to work their way down. As the thaw field melts, you're actually finding yourself throwing 2x8s to get to the pipes because the hole that the thawing pipe gets into is shifting. It's getting bigger and bigger. So there's more, as it thaws, you get more and more water. And finally, at some point, you can't let the water run anymore. And it's an art form to know when to pull all that piping up, because you want to save it. One, because it costs money. Two, if you leave the pipe in there and it gets stuck and you can't get to it because there's just no way to get to it by walking these planks, then it just becomes an impediment for when the gold dredge actually starts trying to dig. It's just something else that's in the way. So it's something that typically you're always going to have some thaw pipes that remain in the field, but you try not to be the one who left one in the field if you're a thaw field worker. It's miserable work. Mosquitoes, cold, whatever the environment is, rain, you're just experiencing it when you're working on a thaw field. So I did that for a season. The next season, I knew a little bit more, and so they let me on board the gold dredge itself. And I started out as a deckhand. A deckhand is the most stupid person on the dredge. All they're doing is trying to do the heavy labor that any other member of the crew wants done. If they need grease moved here, if they need help on moving a rock, or if they need heavy tools to repair equipment, holding cable, whatever it is, you're just the goat. You're the goat. You're the one who goes and gets all of this stuff done. That's a deckhand. But you're being paid more than a thaw field worker because you're on board the dredge, and there's a certain amount of promotion in being out of the weather too. The important thing about being a deckhand is it's your first experience of working in a dredge. Now, gold dredge number 5 operates off of electrical lines. Many of the dredges did. They were electrically operated. On dredge number 5, it was 10,000 volts of electricity. It's a metal dredge, and it's sitting in water. So there's really very little room for making mistakes. And that's the important thing to understand about working in a dredge, is that as you're working in a dredge, all this equipment, which is designed to take large, heavy things and break them into small things, is operating in a 3-dimensional place. And it's noisy. It sounds like a metal dinosaur being tortured. It's really noisy. And there's mud, spray everywhere. And you have to understand, safety equipment was not in mind when they built these dredges. So it's ready to remove parts of your body if you make any mistakes on where your head is, where your hands are, where your feet are. You just need to be careful. So how do we make it work? Well, this is where the winchman works, and what he does is he operates the bucket line. Each bucket is digging and putting material into this tunnel, or we call it a trommel, but it's a screen, a circular screen that has little holes in it, and there's a very high pressure amount of water going in there, and it'll kill you if you were in there and it was on. And it's washing all that material that the bucket line is dropping into there. And because of, it's again the same principle, the lighter stuff gets washed onto this coarse gravel conveyor, and it gets dropped into tailings, the stuff that we don't want. And the heavier stuff drops into, again, sluices, except they're several times the size of a house on area of a house on dredge number 5. So the stern oiler is responsible for how this trommel is working. You're paying attention to that, and you're paying attention to the gravel conveyor, making sure that everything's going up there. The trick is you have to spike the dredge in the ground somehow, because otherwise, when the bucket line's trying to dig up the material, it'll just push back. It's got to have something to anchor it so that those buckets can get grip on the material in front of it. And so that's called the pivot or the spud, and it's something that you drop down. So